I mean, if you just look at this car, it's impossible to ignore how gorgeous it is, even when you're doing something as obnoxious as just doing ridiculous, unorchestrated donuts in the middle of the road. Welcome to Smash or Pass Gran Turismo Edition, the mini-series where we review high-end cars in Gran Turismo 7 to arrive at the ultimate recommendation of Smash or Pass. I'm your host, GT Jesse, and I'm a data scientist by day and sim racing enthusiast by night. I developed a scoring algorithm to provide you, sim racers, an unbiased opinion on whether you should smash this car and spend your hard-earned credits, or pass on this one and save them for next time. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please do hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below what car you want to see reviewed in the next installment of Smash or Pass. In episode 2 of Smash or Pass, we are heading over to the legendary car dealership where we are going to purchase the 1967 Ferrari P4. Now this car is being sold for $9 million large right now, and it only has 448 horsepower. So that's a lot of money for not a lot of power. But folks, if you know anything about this car, you know that it is a purpose-built V12 endurance machine. This car, in its heyday in the 60s, was legendary for going up against Ford in the 1967 24 Hours of Daytona, where there were 2 Ferrari P4s and 1 412P that crossed the finish line. For P1, P2, and P3, it was a photo finish. It was called Enzo's Revenge because just the year prior, in 1966, Ford in their GT had crossed the finish line at Le Mans in P1, P2, and P3. So let's go on ahead and jump right in and see whether or not you should smash or pass your 9 million credits on this 67 Ferrari. Now, before we start testing, we're going to head over to GT Auto and see what kind of customizations are available for this legendary car. And unfortunately, it looks like there are no customizations available, so that's kind of a bummer, but okay, I mean, it's kind of a beautiful car anyways, so you don't really need to change it if it's not broken, right? You know, I was thinking about putting a different paint scheme on it, but since you can't see the paint before you buy it, I decided to just leave it, the old school racing red color. Heading over to the tuning shop, all of the cars that I test, I leave in their stock form, so you know exactly what you're getting for your money, but there is some opportunity to make this car better, even though it has it has a customizable LSD. That's good. You're going to need that to prevent oversteer. I recall that from Gran Turismo Sport. We've got racing brakes, customizable suspension, racing hard tires, the racing muffler, and you can still stroke it up, put an intercooler on it. Yeah, there's an opportunity still here to make this car better than it already is, but we'll be testing it in its stock form. Alright, before we head over to the track, we're just going to talk about a couple of the intangibles here. So first is the appearance of this vehicle, the curb appeal, if you will, and interior, you know, it's very nice, but it's very no frills as well. I wouldn't mind seeing myself in that seat, sitting in that cockpit driving this race car, but for all intents and purposes, it is a no-frills race car, and so because of that, the interior is going to get a 7 out of 10. The exterior, on the other hand, this car is iconic. It is one of the most recognizable cars in motorsport history, and because of that, you know, I personally believe you look at this car, you look at the lines, you look at how it's designed. You know, it's got the quad, dual stacked exhaust tips. It's absolutely gorgeous. I don't think anybody will argue with me that this is a 10 out of 10 as far as exterior styling, but again, 7 out of 10 for interior styling. So it receives a combined curb appeal score of 8.5 out of 10, and for value, this car comes in at 2.8, and that's because it's really in the top 1% as far as pricing is concerned. It's 9 million credits, and it's a road car, so alas, Gran Turismo 7 really hasn't found a place for road cars yet. I think the only time you were able to actually use this car in Gran Turismo Sport was during time trials, or you know, maybe some select race modes in single player, but really not a huge place for this car in the game. And so because of that, the usability is very low, the price is very high, and so the value is a 2.8. Taking a quick look at the spec sheet before we head over to Special Stage Route X to do our top speed test and our quarter mile test, we can see this car has max power of 448 horsepower with a weight of 1,746 pounds. So that gives us a power to weight ratio of about 1 to 4 or 0.26, and that's a little bit worse than the Ferrari from last week, the FXXK, which had a power to weight ratio of 0.4. The quarter mile time that's quoted for this car is 11.21 seconds. We've left the car completely stock, and so that is our target to beat in this next test. If we look at the stability ratings, low speed stability is rated at negative 0.3, which is considered neutral. High speed is negative 0.99, which is considered understable. So we'll test that out after we do these tests, but I do recall taking this car on time trials at Willow Springs in Gran Turismo Sport and it having a tendency to oversteer around high speed corners. But now we're going to head to Special Stage Route X for our top speed and quarter mile tests. As with all of our quarter mile tests, we are launching with TC set to 1, and we are looking for the 400 meter marker. That'll mark our quarter mile time. So this is 100 meters, next is 200 meters, here we go, 300 meters, and 400 meters. That was just over 10 seconds. We'll go back and watch the replay to see where that finishes. But before we do, let's go ahead and see the top speed for this 67 Ferrari P4 with a 1 to 4 power to weight ratio. We're at 187 miles an hour, 190 miles an hour. This car only has 5 gears, so maybe with some good tuning we can get some better performance out of it. We're redlining at 194. Can we get 195? All right, we got 195. Are we going to get 196 before we go up? We got 196. We got 197. Nope, looks like top speed is 196. Looking at the photo finish here for the first quarter mile attempt, and we do see that the nose is across the line, and when the nose crossed the line, our trap time was 10.684 for our quarter mile time, so that definitely beats the quoted time that Polyphony provided, but we just want to run that again and see if there's any opportunity to improve. You know, that was our first run, so we come in, we warm up our tires, even though it's a time trial and that probably doesn't matter. TC is set to 1, we're going to flip it down to 0. We're going to get a strong run down the straight here. But then you're going to see me go into 4th gear and then not go into 4th gear. And in the famous words of Dominic Toretto, granny shifting, not double clutching like you should. We roll across the finish line, and this still ends up being a 10-second trap. It's 10.634 this time. So it's actually a better trap time than our previous of 10.684. And so our testing at Special Stage Route X resulted in a top speed of 196 miles per hour and a quarter mile time of 10.634. Now for the drivability test, we are back at High Speed Ring, and what we decided to do this time was set up a quote professional level unquote race, arcade race with the AI, and just see how this car handles in a race setting. And you're going to see pretty much exactly how it handles heading into turn 1 here. Basically oversteering ourselves into oblivion. And so when I started the video, I headed into the tuning shop, and I specifically mentioned the fully customizable LSD and how handy it would come in with this car. And then when we were looking at the spec sheet, I was talking about the stability of the car and how I've recalled very specifically in Gran Turismo Sport this car's tendency to oversteer. And quite frankly, I don't know how this car won any championships, because for me personally, without tuning it, again, we're testing these things out in their stock form, this car is almost entirely undrivable. I mean, it's all of the cars that you drove when you first got Gran Turismo 7, you know, all of the tests that you did, and you know, the first impressions that you got of the game where it was like, oh shit, this is way different than Gran Turismo Sport and the cars are really hard to drive. All of that is coming back, right? I feel like I'm back in the S10 Porsche at Spa on the wet track, except it's dry. And I'm just driving around High Speed Ring instead of Spa. So, you know, that kind of gives you my overall impression of what it's like to drive this car. It's really not good in its current form. I would imagine if you loosen up the LSD in the rear and you add a little bit of rear ballast and you soften up the rear suspension, that this car would become a lot more drivable. But as it currently stands, you really can't go around any corners with any more than maybe a quarter throttle. And I'm talking even like this big banked high-speed corner that's normally flat out. You can't even go quarter throttle around it without oversteering. So the car is really not very drivable, and that's unfortunate. But you know, it's also a car from the 60s, and it's a V12 endurance powerhouse, and the drivability was up to the driver, right? And the people that were driving these cars back then were very much so professional race car drivers. So their skill set in navigating difficult vehicles is a little bit different than mine, and I imagine a little bit different than yours as well. But it's possible that we could make this car a little bit more enjoyable with just a little bit of tuning. But as it stands, the drivability score that I give this car is a 4. So after all of that, what is the final verdict for the 1967 Ferrari P4? Well, it has a value score of 2.8 because it's really expensive and you can't use it anywhere yet. Curb appeal, 8.5. It's beautiful to look at. Interior is no frills, but easily one of the most beautiful, most recognizable, most iconic cars in motorsport history. Power score is a 6.3, has an okay power to weight ratio and a decent quarter mile time. Top speed is 196. In its current state, it has 5 gears and it tops out pretty quick on special stage Route X. Handling and drivability are terrible. Low speed stability is pretty okay if you're very cautious of what you're doing, but high speed stability is almost non-existent unless you're going in a straight line. And we don't play Gran Turismo to drag race. So all in, this car receives a smash or pass rating of 5.4, and my ultimate recommendation is, unless you have a very specific reason for buying this car, save your hard-earned credits and pass. Thanks again for watching, folks. I do hope you enjoyed the second installment in the Smash or Pass series for Gran Turismo 7. If you did like it, please do hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more like it in the future. And let me know in the comments below what car you want to see in a future installment of Smash or Pass.